The night is heavy with silence, then tat, tat, tat. Boom! Screams ripping through the darkness. The sound of gunfire and tanks crushing gravel fills the Ugandan air. It is a sound that would define the years of fear, a sound that carries the shadow of one man, Isaac Lugonzo Maliyamungu. To some, he was the steel fist of Idi Amin's regime, the general whose loyalty was absolute. To others, he was the very embodiment of terror, a man whose name whispered in the dark made children cry and men fall to their knees. His story is not only the story of blood and power. It is also the story of love, of marriage, of betrayal, of exile, and of the slow decay of everything he once held dear. But before the guns, before the screams, before the tanks rolled over bodies at Entebbe, there was a boy. Isaac Lugonzo Maliyamungu was born in 1934 in Lugonza village, northwestern Uganda, in what was then the British Protectorate. He came into a world of poverty and resilience, raised among the Alur people, a tribe with a warrior tradition and deep pride. As a child, he carried water from the river, chased goats across dry fields, and listened to elders tell stories of courage and betrayal by the fire. Yet even then, there was something different about him, something in his eyes. They were sharp, restless, unyielding. His friends remembered that he did not laugh like the other boys. When he wanted something, he would fight for it, and when he fought, he would fight to win. The 1950s swept across East Africa with winds of change. Nationalism was rising, whispers of independence grew louder, and young Maliyamungu found himself drawn toward the military. Power, he knew, was not in the hands of farmers or teachers, it was in the hands of soldiers. The British colonial government was recruiting young men to train, and Isaac, tall and muscular, was chosen. The military became his calling, his path to transformation. It gave him structure, a uniform, a gun, and most dangerously, it gave him a taste of control. When independence came in 1962, Uganda celebrated, but beneath the joy was chaos. Politics turned violent, ethnic divisions deepened, and in the barracks, men like Maliyamungu watched closely. By the late 1960s, he had risen through the ranks, and when Idi Amin seized power in the coup of 1971, Isaac Maliyamungu was right there, one of his most loyal officers. He was not the thinker nor the strategist, but Amin saw in him something he valued even more, unshakable loyalty and the coldness to do what others would not. Maliyamungu became Amin's enforcer, his shadow of fear. While Amin played the smiling dictator before cameras, Maliyamungu executed the terror in the shadows. And then came his marriage, the glamorous chapter that stood in stark contrast to the brutality of his days. Amongi was her name. She was an air hostess, beautiful, elegant, and adored by many. When Maliyamungu courted her, it was not just love, it was power embracing beauty. The wedding was lavish, soldiers in pressed uniforms lining the grounds, dignitaries was whispering, and photographers capturing the moment. A portrait of the marriage was framed, Isaac in his decorated uniform, chest out, medals shining, standing like a man who owned Uganda. At his side, Amongi in her bridal dress, radiant, soft, the very image of a woman stepping into a life of privilege. The photo would remain as a cruel reminder of how high she once stood before the fall. As Maliyamungu rose, so too did their life. Amongi travelled in luxury, silk dresses from abroad, servants at her feet, cars brought to her doorstep. She was seen at Entebbe Airport, smiling, carrying herself like a queen. The wife of Uganda's most feared general was untouchable. And yet, behind the glamour was blood. For while Amongi poured wine in crystal glasses, her husband poured blood onto Ugandan soil. The mayor of Masaka was one of the first high-profile victims. Accused of betrayal, of disloyalty, of whispering against Amin's rule, he was dragged from his office. Witnesses spoke of Maliyamungu himself overseeing the execution. The sound of gunfire, tat-tat-tat, echoed in the air, and the mayor's lifeless body crumpled into the dust. Fear spread across Masaka like wildfire. Then came Kung'u Karumba, one of Kenya's most respected freedom fighters, a man who had fought for independence alongside Jomo Kenyatta. Karumba disappeared in Uganda, never to return. Whispers spread that he had crossed Maliyamungu, that he had involved himself in business gone wrong, and for that he paid with his life. Some say he was executed in cold blood, his body dissolved into acid. Others say he was buried in the forests, his bones never to be found. What is certain is that Maliyamungu's hand was there, silencing a hero, sending fear across borders. And then, Entebbe, 1977. A failed uprising of Air Force men. They dared to rise against Amin, and Maliyamungu was sent to crush them. At the gates of Entebbe Airport, 2 Catholic priests tried to intervene, pleading for peace, for mercy. But Maliyamungu was not a man of mercy. He ordered the tanks forward. The priests fell to their knees, holding crucifixes high, but the tanks did not stop. The earth shook. Clack, clank, clank! And in a horrifying moment, the holy men were flattened, their cries swallowed by steel and dust. Witnesses who survived carried that memory like a wound that never healed. Uganda bled not only in body, but in spirit. The prisons, too, knew his shadow. Men accused of treason, women suspected of disloyalty, even soldiers whose loyalty wavered, all felt his wrath. Torture chambers filled with screams. Ah! Whip, crack, thud! And in those chambers, Maliyamungu's name was feared more than the instruments of pain themselves. He was not just carrying out Amin's will, he was enjoying the power, the absolute control over life and death. Yet, at home, Amongi lived a life of gold. The duality was staggering. One man, 2 worlds. In public, he was the butcher, the enforcer, the man who crushed priests beneath tanks. In private, he was a husband, dining with his wife, presenting her with jewels, posing for family photographs that painted them as a power couple. She smiled in the photos, her eyes not yet aware of the cruel destiny awaiting her. But all power crumbles. By 1979, Amin's regime collapsed under the weight of Tanzanian forces and Ugandan exiles marching back to reclaim their country. Panic spread across Kampala. Ministers fled. Generals packed their wealth into cars. And Isaac Maliyamungu, once untouchable, was suddenly prey. He fled into exile, carrying his family with him, his fortune hidden in gold and dollars. Amongi followed, clinging to the remnants of luxury. But exile is never kind. The man who had once walked Kampala like a lion now hid in foreign lands, watching over his shoulder, haunted by enemies. The guns no longer saluted him. The tanks no longer obeyed his command. His power was gone, and with it, the world he built for Amongi. In 1984, Isaac Maliyamungu died suddenly in exile in Sudan. Some say poison, others say illness. Whispers of revenge circulated. But what is clear is that the man who had lived by the gun did not live to see an old age. His death was quiet, almost anticlimactic compared to the roaring violence of his life. No salutes, no grand funeral, just a fallen giant, buried in foreign soil, far from the land he once terrorized. And then there was Amongi. From the heights of glamour, she fell into shadows. Without her husband's protection, without the wealth that once flowed like rivers, she descended into poverty. Once dressed in the silks of Europe, she now wore faded clothes. Once driven in convoys of military cars, she now walked the dusty paths of Kampala's forgotten corners. Once photographed beside Uganda's most feared general, she now sat alone in the slums, her beauty faded, her memories heavy. People whispered when they saw her, "That is Amongi, the wife of Maliyamungu." But the whispers carried no respect, only pity. Her story was a cruel echo of Uganda itself, a rise into false glory, a fall into suffering. She had dined on luxury, yes, but her table had been built on blood. And when the blood dried, so too did the wealth. Today, the name Maliyamungu is remembered with fear, with anger, with sorrow. He is the symbol of a Uganda under siege.